Hey gang, Luke Nukem here. Quick questions. Remember back in a time where the Marvel Cinematic Universe didn't suck 50 shades of fecal matter through a silly straw and we were given the opportunity to consume one amazing film after another, such as Captain America Civil War and the original Avengers? Remember the three-dimensional characters that audiences connected with intangibly over the course of 21 movies with their ingenious arcs up until the ultimate closer that was Avengers Endgame?
Petridge Farm remembers.
Oh, those were the days.
Why, I ask? Because we have submerged into the fathomless vacuum of suckitude known as the fourth phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, pun very much intended, and that the film production company itself has deteriorated for the worse. After the release of Avengers Endgame, the film opened the door to a new era of journeys that fan favorites characters could take that could be seen on both theaters and Disney+. And hopefully, if given in the hands of writers who aren't talentless hacks, would potentially create outstanding stories. And what we received was an excruciating nightmare of content. The plots of these shows, including the film Black Widow, were unbelievably rife with obvious plot holes larger than Randy Pitchford's ego, world building and lore inconsistencies that ruined everything that you understood of past installments, including eradicating the idea of free will. But the absolute worst sin of all were the show's ability of destroying and assassinating characters that fans have cherished and respected into butchered versions of themselves, crumbling their moral values, their intelligence, and the arcs that made viewers relate to them. Wanda was converted from a misunderstood character into a monster who enslaved an entire town without any repercussions and was made the villain of her own show. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier was an even more wretched abomination that made Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes into selfish, incompetent dolts, demonized an actual upstanding American hero who truthfully earned his title, had Falcon sympathize for a terrorist girl who threatened political officials and murdered innocent people, topping it off by the film providing preachy and clumsily delivered social justice and political messages. And then there was the show Loki, a program that featured the 2012 version that we've seen in the original Avengers that became less conniving and ruthless into being more emasculated, humiliated, moronic, and pathetic. Do I want Marvel to get better and stray from tedium? Of course, just as much as any studio, especially the ones that they are bought by. But until the writers change and the fans stop consuming these films like candy, Marvel will never change. Anyway, the next film in the MCU assembly line was a film I originally was looking forward to, and that was none other than Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Another origin story supposedly bringing the master of Kung Fu and the first Asian superhero to the big screen and into the next Avengers lineup. And much like another overhyped Marvel movie like Black Panther, the film has received critical acclaim, calling it one of the best MCU movies ever made and a triumph beyond epic proportions. Ladies, gents, I hate to ruin the celebration, but that assessment is far from true. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is nothing revolutionary in terms of storytelling or as a blockbuster. It's an average, safe superhero film manufactured to set up the next MCU movie, and while it is superior to dreck like Black Widow or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the amount of potential is wasted based on what is on display. And with that said, let us begin. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings tells the story of the titular character played by Simu Liu, who was raised by his father, the immortal warlord Zhu Wenwu, to become a heavily trained assassin under a criminal organization that has spanned throughout millenniums called the Ten Rings. After realizing the kind of monster he was going to become, he runs away to start a new life in San Francisco, where he grew up and now works as a valet in a hotel with his high school best friend named Katie, played by Awkwafina. But after encountering henchmen on a bus who would come to steal his mystical pendant that was given by his mother, the events that transpire lead him back home to find out what his father's intentions are for the magical MacGuffin and his son's return. Going back to my brutally honest introduction, I illustrated the notion that the writing for this year's installments in the MCU are about as disastrous as the Academy's ratings. And with Shang-Chi being a solo film that is set in a time after the universe was saved in Avengers Endgame, with all of the screw-ups Phase 4 has produced, I was dreading for how the film's script would affect the MCU and, more importantly, work as a story in general. Having seen it, it's perhaps the best film in the MCU's fourth phase. It doesn't do anything destructive to the world building or the characters just as much as the titles that I've showcased to you before. The plot itself, on the other hand, relies on conveniences and unexplained, underdeveloped circumstances for certain plot sections to carry the film forward, and worst of all, the wasted potential for what could have been a powerful picture. First and foremost, it's made abundantly clear that the main villain Wenwu and his wife Ying Li fell in love with each other to the point of marriage and giving up their gifted abilities just so they can conceive our main character and our main character's sister. However, we're never really shown or given a clear explanation or reason as to why these two individuals have feelings for each other. When our main villain arrives at the forest, as we already seen from his backstory, as being a powerful and immortal warlord with the power of the 10 rings, Ilan could probably suspect that he's an intruder, a threat, or that he may trick her into falling in love with him just so he can consume power for himself from an enchanted mystical village that she protects called Talo. But at a point to where the film shows Wenwu's relationship with Ying Li via a montage, the film manipulates the audience and contrives it in a way to where it serves as surface level character development in order for the plot to proceed, or by that these two individuals love each other. There are many additional plot points in the film script that don't make a lick of sense concerning the film's stakes and established rules in the real world, as well as the film's universe. Shang-Chi and Katie have to get to Macau, China, which is where his sister is located, because he believes that his sister is in grave danger and that the 10 rings are after her pendant as well. So he buys plane tickets to get there. There are two things that get in the way of this from working. First of all, given of how we know what Shang-Chi and his best friend's conditions are living in expensive San Francisco, one in an ordinary apartment, the other one in her parents' apartment, and seeing how highly lucrative it is to get from San Francisco all the way to China, I highly doubt the situation would go down as the film presented it. And let's not forget that the 10 rings can monitor Shang-Chi's exact locations and movements, so they can basically track him down to the airplane or basically stop him when he departs. It gets even more ridiculous once our heroes are imprisoned at the 10 rings headquarters with, spoiler alert, Ben Kingsley's Trevor Slattery from Iron Man 3. They're trying to reach Talo and warn the village people since Wenwu are hatching an elaborate plot to annihilate the hidden mystical village. And lo and behold, a creature who happens to be Trevor's pet, who just so happens to be in the prison alongside our heroes, just so happens to have a scent that can track down and go to the exact location of the hidden civilization. Holy coincidences, Batman! So yeah, the story of course does have its issues, but there is one element that could hopefully keep the film afloat and possibly keep it entertaining. Its characters and the acting of said characters. The film has a couple of tremendous performances from veteran Michelle Yeoh as Shang-Chi's aunt and one of the guardians of Talo, Fala Chin as Shang-Chi's mother, and Mengir Zhang, I'm not even gonna pretend I pronounced that correctly, and her adequate performance and presence as Jia Ling, Shang-Chi's sister. As far as characters that feature their own solo story in Marvel, Shang-Chi is probably one of the most bland characters in the MCU, as it's also reinforced by not just how the script handles him, but Simu Liu's performance doesn't make him stand out as well as it should. My issue is with the fact that whenever Simu Liu is performing in dramatic, tense, or lighthearted scenes, he has no range to invoke personality, life, or charisma to his character to where we can have some kind of emotional investment for him, especially since we're looking at a character who was transformed by his upbringing since he was 7 to become a merciless killing machine and was left demoralized up until he decides to leave. On top of that, the script should have given him much more inner turmoil for him to overcome. There are flashbacks that unveil the kind of hardships that he has dealt with ever since he was a child all the way till his adult years. However, he deals with his inner demons and his haunting past of him becoming an assassin off screen. Not just that, but when we see him in the film's opening scenes, he's very whimsical, mentally stable, and sociable towards Katie's friends. And all of this just makes you ask, what was his life like alone without a family member with him? What did he do to regain his humanity? Perhaps small, impactful scenes of him struggling with his past, or trying to find peace instead of him singing karaoke or getting drunk with his friend, or bucket loads of exposition would have added much development and empathy for him. But the film never allows us to witness the growth unfold, and that is a piteous shame that that's the case. Awkwafina has returned to play yet another typecast role, as she plays as Katie. Remember way back when I criticized and to some small extent commended her role as Sisu in Raya and the Last Dragon? Well, take those thoughts that I had previously and apply them to this movie. Most of the problems I have with the role isn't just that she's annoying on screen, even though she is. It's that the script is so preoccupied on making her character nothing but the comedy dispenser. Now, she's very talented when giving sincere performances, as it's also shown in this film as well, but not so much in the comedic department. Every single joke that the writers offer her are so forced and go on for far longer than they should, especially with jokes such as her having trouble pronouncing Shang-Chi's name correctly. And the other drawback of her is that her character adds totally nothing of value to the story. She doesn't have any combat experience or information that could be useful for our heroes, and she contributes absolutely nothing to the plot other than doing stuff that our main characters can do just as much as she can. Perhaps the most interesting and impactful character of the entire film would have to be Zhu Wenwu, the main villain of the film, as he is a character, the performance from Tony Leung himself, and the hidden potential in the script that has to do with the dynamic relationship between the father and his son not only sparks a genuinely good character in him, but the possibilities for better plot elements. Wenwu spent his entire life dismantling empires and bringing down governments in a continuous lust for power, until meeting and eventually marrying Li. He tries to change his life and redeem himself for the better. But as tragedy strikes, revenge consumes him, and he does whatever it takes to bring those responsible to their knees, even if it takes making his son into a full-fledged assassin and rescuing those he loves after hearing rumors of them being captured and tortured by their people in far-off lands. This not only establishes the familial history and the conflict between both the father and his offspring, but it also demonstrates just how much of a flawed, tragic villain that Wenwu is. There is a better film in here with material such as this, and if the film focused on the dichotomy between both the vengeful father and the conflicted son, removed some secondary characters, with some great execution, we could have had a great movie or a solid one in our hands. I also don't want to go without saying that Tony Leung nails it as the main antagonist. His more calm delivery and range, especially in a scene, for example, where he's telling cheeky stories of the names that he's received in his lifetime, is grand. And with the dramatic and emotional scenes, he still manages to provide a very authentic and empathetic performance. Marketed as a superhero martial arts film, I would have to say that the martial arts sequences are sensationally choreographed and excellent in terms of precision, pacing, and timing. But I don't refer to the climactic war sequences in the final act. I'm talking about the hand-to-hand fights that transpire on screen, one of which being Shang-Chi going up against an opponent by the name of Death Dealer, and the other being Shang-Chi going up against his father in the ultimate CGI face-off. The coordination and the dancing between these combatants are done with such flashiness and expertise that you can imagine the amount of time and practice that it took for these actors to perfect these movements and attacks for these action sequences that happen on the big silver screen. There are particular instances of improbabilities within the action scenes, such as a particular antagonist by the name of Razor Fist, no, not the awesome YouTuber, surviving a bus crash without any semblance of a scratch or a broken body part. Or how about Shang-Chi being knocked into the lake unconscious and having him holding his breath underwater for such a long period of time to the point where he basically becomes impervious to drowning, like he's David Blaine. As per usual with Marvel movies, there always contains an amount of comedy relief to help the audiences be entertained and laugh, and to detract the film from taking itself too seriously. However, upon watching it, my impression of the film's attempt at comedy was nothing but a flat line. And no, the comedy does not stop with Awkwafina's painfully scripted quips. There are several jokes that break suspense in the action sequences, such as a neck-bearded nerd delivering his unfunny attempts at a chiseled Adonis impression as he's streaming the fight on the bus. And even while the action scene keeps going, it sometimes stops dead in its tracks, just for this guy to spout tiring, exhausting humor. There's a scene in which Shang-Chi is talking about his indoctrination of becoming a killer to Katie, only to have the narration cut mid-sentence just for a plane stewardess to ask them both whether they would like beef or vegetarian, breaking the tone yet again. Or even awkward ones that pertain to Bing Kingsley's Trevor Slattery that are not even funny or even at a bare minimum chuckle-worthy. Visually, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is a feast for the eyes. The visual effects of mythical terrain such as the forest maze in Ta Lo are richly designed and mind-bending. And while there are certain creatures that are very decent looking in the Hidden Village, such as a horse or a lion with dragon-like features resembling mythological beasts of Asian culture, a dragon known as the Great Protector, or a wolf-like dog and her pup with multiple tails as it looks something like Vulpix and Ninetales from Pokemon, there are some beasts that do not look convincing whatsoever, especially towards the end of the film. As for Green Screen King, some of it looks obviously noticeable and executed in such little effort, but at other times it is done with such competence, allowing for audiences to believe that the actors are walking around or even being surrounded in preternatural environments. To put it this way, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is quite the Marvel movie, and I don't count it as a bad thing, but I wouldn't declare it as a positive thing either. It has hints of potential and some concepts delved in the film's script that, with a better writer, could have worked peerlessly. But as it stands, while it's possibly the best film in the fourth phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it is still a disjointed, unengaging, discordant, underwhelming mess. Alright guys, so that was my review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. If you like this review, please like and comment below what you thought of the film yourself. You'll also find me on media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and if you have a phone, you can find me on Instagram. And as always, if you'd like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. To word differently, a cringy speech from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you gotta do better, Marvel. My name is Luke Nukem. And you, my friends, have been blown away.